Hi, I'm Adriana.
And I'm Annie.
For our AIS 110 final project, we decided to research and discuss California's history of Indian boarding schools and the impact it has had on Native communities to this day. Within this presentation, we will discuss what assimilation is, boarding school goals, the impact of boarding schools, resistance, influence on today's communities, the reflection, and a conclusion. Before we go further into our presentation, we would like to explain what assimilation means in the context of our presentation and provide some historical context as well. In the late 1800s, a federally nationwide U.S. policy was established to create Indian boarding schools. The purpose of these schools was to erase the native culture by forcing children to not speak in their language or sing their traditional songs. Instead, these children were forced to speak English and sing American songs. So in other words, the purpose of these schools was to assimilate young children. To assimilate means to systematically take away a person's cultural identity, such as their language, clothing, songs, and values, because it is seen as inferior to another culture. In these boarding schools, if the children were to sing or speak in their native tongue, there would be consequences. In 1879, the Carolissa Indian School was founded and set as an example for other boarding schools to follow. Following Carlissa's lead in 1902, California established their own boarding schools, such as the Sherman Institute and Fort Bidwell. The image on this slide shows that the before and after of Native children from attending the boarding schools. In the image, it is clear to see that the children have changed their hair, as it is much shorter in the after image. Their clothing is more Americanized and does not have any symbolism of their culture, and they are not wearing any jewelry. These schools really weren't about learning, they were about control. The children were told their culture was wrong and even shameful. They were forced to let go of their own beliefs and replace them with American culture. Instead of education, these students were sent to other locations and forced to do chores. If the children held on to their own culture or beliefs in any way, they would be punished. Everything from their language to clothing was seen as something that needed to be erased. Imagine just being 5 or 6 years old and taken from your family, forced into a place where you couldn't speak your language or even cry. Survivors of these schools talk about feeling invisible, afraid, and alone. The kind of experience doesn't go away. It gets passed down generation from generation. The emotional scars are visible in the Native communities today, as Native Americans struggle to trust the education system, and children that were punished and forced to give up their names, hair, and their clothing and their cultural identity within these schools. Under the guise of providing an education, these schools slowly attempted to erase the Native American culture by force.
After years of forced assimilation, many California Native communities began reclaiming their culture. One early example was the ghost dance, started by Paiute leader Vowaka. He taught that living peacefully and following traditional ways would bring healing and the return of ancestors. Although banned by the U.S. government, tribes continued the practice as a form of spiritual resistance. In 1978, the American Indian Religious Freedom Act gave Native people the right to openly practice their beliefs and ceremonies, something that had once been illegal. Language is also a key part of cultural survival. Boarding schools try to erase native languages, but today, groups like AICLS are helping bring them back through classes and mentorship. As PBS puts it, you're not just protecting words, you're protecting a cultural identity and the well-being of real people. Even today, Native communities in California are still dealing with the effects of boarding schools. Many families lost their languages, cultural traditions, and even their sense of identity. But these communities are now working hard to heal and bring their culture back. Programs like the Advocates for Indigenous California Language Survival help tribes teach their languages to young people. Ceremonies and spiritual practices are also being brought back and celebrated more openly, especially after laws like the American Indian Religious Freedom Act gave legal protection. All of these efforts, teaching language, protecting traditions, and sharing culture, are helping Native communities heal from the trauma and reclaim their strength. So to wrap up our presentation, we want to highlight the key takeaways. First, Indian boarding schools were designed to erase Native identity. Children were robbed of their culture, language, and family connections, but Native families and students showed resistance. They found ways to hold on to who they were through language, traditions, and silent acts of survival. Today, we see powerful examples of cultural resurgence. Communities are reclaiming their languages, practicing traditional ceremonies, and healing from intergenerational trauma. Legal protection like the American Indian Religious Freedom Act gave Native people the right to openly practice their religions and protect sacred spaces, a huge step forward. And most importantly, we all have a role to play. Whether it's through learning, listening, or advocating, we can support Native voices and help ensure that this history is remembered and respected.